Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. You'll get 5 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Plus, enjoy access to the American Express Global Lounge Collection. And with the welcome offer of 150,000 points, your business can soar to all new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum. Built for business by American Express.
Your neighborhood just got cooler with Kroger Delivery's refrigerated trucks. Simply order groceries at the same great prices online as in-store, and we'll bring them to you fresh every time. And if that wasn't cool enough, you can now earn 4 times the fuel points after 4 with your digital coupon. Choose a next-day Kroger Delivery time slot for 4 p.m. or later on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Must deliver by February 4th. Restrictions apply. See Kroger.com for details.
I do wonder how much of it was scripted.
Yeah.
How many, were there pages on set? Was it just complete improvisation? Would he just turn up and say, well, this is what I'm going through at this point in my life and I'm just going to pump it into the film and just put it on the screen? I'd be interested to know like how much of it was scripted and how much of it was just on the hoof.
Yeah.
It's a 0. It's an 8. It's episode 108.
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher podcast. We are joined today by Matt.
Hello.
And Eran.
Hello.
I thought you were going to do a brap, brap, brap.
Brap, brap, brap. Yay! That moment's gone now.
Yeah.
Let's move on smoothly.
And Helen.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about the other side of the wind. As always, guys, we have all the show notes online at flixwatcher.tv for all the episodes. So please come and visit us there. Of course, join us on Twitter at FlixWatcherPod. And please come to iTunes, rate us, and subscribe.
All films featured in the podcast were available to stream on Netflix UK at the time of recording, and please be aware there will be spoilers and some language that may offend. Hello and welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher podcast. In our studio today we have Matt and Eran. If you would like to say hello to our lovely listeners and tell them about the work that you do, please.
Hi, my name is Matt Whitecross. I am a director and a bit of a jack of all trades. A director, editor, writer, anything. I'll come in and have a look at your radiator if you want. But how
much do you charge for radiator repair?
Radiators, well, nothing. I've never done it before, so I'm still learning. But yeah, I'm kind of I direct mostly. I've done. I started in drama and then I moved more into documentary more recently for various reasons. And the last couple of things I did. We did a film about Oasis called Supersonic and one about Coldplay called A Head Full of Dreams. And we're working on a boxing doc.
Yeah,
the only tiny ones, that's it. Just to help them out to see if they can, because it's hard out there.
So I've seen both Supersonic and Head Full of Dreams. I think I met you after the Q&A with Supersonic at the Pitch House.
Yes.
Because my first band I ever saw live was Oasis at Main Road. I'm from Manchester.
Yep.
So you had to. I love Oasis' first few albums. But the thing about the Coldplay one, which really gets me, which really interests me, is the fact you started recording them from before they became Coldplay.
Right.
Which is kind of insane.
Yes, it was insane. I didn't expect them to become Coldplay.
Yeah.
So I filmed them before they were in a band. So I'm either massively clairvoyant and clever or just very lucky.
But they were like your student uni band, weren't they?
Yeah.
Your university.
Yeah.
They were like the student uni band. So
we
just knew them and just mates at uni and...
We just hang out. Yeah, it was very weird. It still feels surreal in a kind of way that I think I'm stuck in some kind of drug coma and someone's going to wake up and go, no, they didn't make it. Because it's very strange that we would have all still been hanging out 20 years later. But somehow we are. And luckily, for 20 years, they said, we're not interested in making a film. And then they finally cracked. Just after I'd made another film about another band. And I was like, I don't ever want to do that again. But yeah. So, and I'm doing a boxing documentary at the moment.
Cool.
Which I'm not allowed to talk about. But
what makes you change between the drama side and the fictional or fictionalized, I should say, thinking about things like Spike Island,
right,
versus the documentary side of things?
I just love trying new things, really. Sure. And so when I met Eran, actually, we were both doing bits of music video stuff, and we ended up directing some together. And then, some commercials. And at the same time, I was always trying to do dramas. That was always the idea. But I got a chance to do documentaries with Michael Winterbottom. And I got the bug. And what's lovely is, well, it depends on how you look at it. But every time I finish a drama, I'm like, I never want to see another actor again in my life. And every time I do a documentary, it's like, that's it. That's enough reality. I want to move on to, sit down. Someone bring me a nice cup of tea. spend 20 hours rigging a light or whatever it is. But yeah, so each time, and hopefully you take some of the ideas and techniques from documentary and you use them on and vice versa kind of thing.
It's quite interesting. There's not that many directors. I'm not sure about your background in documentary side of things around, but not that many directors do both sides of things. But there are a few prominent ones like Kevin MacDonald,
right,
Michael Winterbottom.
Yeah,
Bart Layton's just in American Animals after Imposter, and now he's doing the Bond film now, isn't he? And it seems like maybe it's a British niche of.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I mean, I just feel like, I think if you're clever and you know what you're doing, you stick to one kind of path. And, if you're a commercials director, you just go along that route and you become the best in the world. But if you're an idiot like me, you just do anything that's interesting.
If you're an idiot.
Yeah. And so I just, every time I do a documentary, I find real life fascinating. And I think, and the other thing was, you ended up with Supersonic. We were supposed to be doing a TV show for Channel 4, like a drama about the miners' strike. And then there's a change of management, as there tends to be every couple of weeks in most broadcasting places. And it was one of those things like that no one was really interested in it anymore. And that landed on my lap. The Oasis film landed on my lap. And we were about to have our first kid. And it was something like, actually, this might be some way of grasping back normality, because you can more or less have a kind of 9 to 7 existence on a film, which you can't do that in drama.
Yeah.
Not that that's the reason to do any film, but I was just like, oh God, this is weird. When we started doing it, it was like, I'm having a normal job. I go to an office and I sit down and I can see my kids. I can put them to bed. That was definitely a good thing.
But also the first film that you made, The Road to Guantanamo, was kind of half fiction, half documentary, isn't it? With Riz Ahmed.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, that was like your introduction into film, wasn't it? It was kind of like
right.
marrying between the two. I guess when I first met you in the midst of making The Road to Guantanamo.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, no, that was it. I mean, I think there was something appealing about shooting reconstructions and then having the documentary side of it and having kind of potentially unreliable narrators. And I mean, that's partly what we're going to go on and talk about with this film,
sure.
The Other Side of the Wind. But I really, for me, I love the fact that there's so many different techniques out there that you can use. And I feel like even now, 100 years on from the beginning of cinema, we're really, really scratching the surface of it. But because it's so expensive and because people get used to what they like and they kind of just want the same, I think it's experimental film experimental films like this one that we're going to talk about just it ended up being very niche rather than being the future. So I find that, there's something lovely about being able to kind of wrong foot yourself and also keep it interesting, because I think if you just regurgitate the same thing every time, I would get bored.
Well, this isn't the same thing. Well, let's talk to Eran for a second before going on to the other side of the wind. You talked about expensive and Riz Ahmed, and tell us about your first film, Shifty, because that was neither, well, that has Riz Ahmed, it wasn't really expensive with a low budget.
No, it was shot Shifty for 100 grand, shot it in 17 days. But that's how we both started out. I was working as an assistant director on Matt's girlfriend at the time's movie called Life and Lyrics, which was like, which had Ashley Waters. Remember Ashley Waters, the rapper from So Solid Crew? Asher D, from So Solid Crew. And that's how me and Matt met, didn't we? We ended up directing his first music video off his first album.
Okay.
And me and Matt co-directed it together. And then we ended up setting up a company with Ben Pugh and Rory Aitken, and we set up a company called Between the Eyes, where we used to make music videos and commercials, and me and you have directed Take That videos together, and then we've gone off our separate ways and we're doing other videos. But I met Riz through you, didn't I? Because you were doing Road to Guantanamo at the time. Right. We then went and directed his music video, Post 9/11 Blues, which is like this quite controversial Riz Ahmed did, which got banned by the BBC.
Nice.
And I'd written Shifty, and you said to me, mate, you should put Riz Ahmed in Shifty. And I was like, oh,
did I?
Yeah, I was like, mate, I don't know if he's right for it. I was like, because he's not threatening in person, Riz, is he? He's quite sort of
your character.
Yeah, well-mannered, and he's slight, and then we auditioned him, and he just blew everyone out the park, and we kind of and
I never got commission.
And then whatever happened to Riz Ahmed?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I put him forward for Star Wars, and I put him forward, but they never got back to me on that. I don't know what happened with that one.
But yeah, my route was through a similar sort of route to Matt's. I came up through being a runner and an AD, and then directed commercials for like Nike and Coca-Cola, and did music videos. And then me and Matt were co-directing, and then we sort of both went our separate ways. And I made my first film, Shifty, and then my second film, Welcome to the Punch, like produced by Ridley Scott, which was more like a sort of kind of bigger London-based action movie. And then I've sort of stayed in that vein. But I also make good money being a writer. Yeah. So I just wrote The Killer for John Woo. And
nice.
I spent last year in LA writing a TV show for Netflix, a sequel to Layer Cake called Viva La Madness with Jason Statham. And I was like over there for a year doing that for Sky Atlantic and Netflix. And so
So you know all about the Netflix kind of realm of things?
Yeah, I've actually worked within the system of Netflix, been in their offices, done note meetings with Netflix, kind of been through the whole process.
Because you might give us some insight as to how films like, going back to yourself, Matt, The Other Side of the Wind come about. So if you can give us, Matt, tell us why you chose this film and give us like a 2-minute synopsis of it.
Well, I first heard about this film probably about 25 years ago. So I, like Eran, like a lot of people who listen to this, probably like both of you, I was obsessed with film from a really early age. But it wasn't, I think now things are much more easily accessible. But back then, if you'd heard about something, the only way to see it was in the cinema or it was on TV one particular night. And you'd have to sit there trying to record it or work the control and stay up till 2 a.m. and try and skip the ads. And there was a documentary about Orson Wells, who was already one of my favorite, if not my favorite director. And I heard this thing was going to be on this documentary. So there was an interview with him. And then they showed these clips from this film that he'd never actually got a chance to finish. It got complicated legally. They'd lost all their money. They lost their cast. Everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong. And they showed a couple of clips and it looked like the most amazing film you'd ever seen. And they said, what a tragedy that it's never going to be seen. It's never going to be finished. And now he's dead. And that was it. And I went and sought out as many of his other films as I could see. And then every 5-10 years or so, you'd hear, oh yeah, apparently they've sorted out all the legal side of things or the financial things has been sorted out. So it's going to come out, and then nothing would happen. And then they suddenly released it last year. Netflix, I'm not 100% sure at what point they got involved, but I think they basically sorted things out through, I guess, a passion about film and through money. And they sorted all those issues out. And so and it premiered at Cannes last year. Now, I was so desperate. The second I heard it was happening, I was like, I've got to see it. And then part of the nature of, I guess, having young kids and also being with someone who's like, you don't necessarily share the same taste in films. Every time I've suggested it, everyone's like, yeah, maybe. And it never happened. And I've been desperate. And I think if you put a gun against my head and said, you've got to choose one director above everyone, obviously I'd choose Eran. but if they said, you get two.
I would obviously choose you as well.
Just get that out of the way.
Get your hand off my knee.
But basically, yeah, my daughter said that ballet thing the other day. She was like, who do you think was best? Don't just say me. And I was like, I wasn't going to say you, actually. But basically, so he's my favorite director, probably. And so I wanted to see it, but I wanted to see it in the right environment. And I tried to see it at the cinema, but it wasn't at the cinema. And then I thought, look, I need a reason. And when we talked about what film I might choose, I was like, it's got to be that one because it'll force me to do it. And I've got a week before we're meeting and it's great. And my wife's actually away in Nigeria, so I've got the kids, but I put them to bed and I do it. And of course, I ended up watching it for the first time last night, like an idiot. And but it was, it is a very, very unusual film. In a good way, I think. You all might disagree. It's not his best film, I wouldn't say. I don't know even if it is his film, because apparently he only 30% of it was finished by the time that everyone else started on it. But they've tried to stay true to his vision. So it's a very difficult thing to describe. So basically...
Is that right? Only 30% of it was shot and finished?
So all of it was shot, but only 30% of it
was edited together.
So
100%. Yeah, so he shot everything he wanted to shoot.
Yeah, everything that's in it is his, and it was based on his script.
Yeah.
I mean, so Orson Wells, if people don't know, a quick plotted summary of his life, which is almost impossible, but he was a kind of boy genius. He was a painter, he was an actor, he was an everything. And then he got the filmmaking bug and he made Citizen Kane at some insanely young age, like 26 or something. And it's still the benchmark, still considered possibly the greatest film of all time, even though he's actually went on to make better films, I think, which is pretty incredible. But the trajectory of his life really is that he kept on trying to make these projects and he fell out of, the studios thought that he was this kind of crazy maverick genius. They didn't want to finance him anymore. They completely destroyed his second film, cut the ending, reshot it, made it happy. And then he flounced off and was like, right, I'm not doing this anymore. And he spent the rest of his life, partly as an actor, doing various different gigs, doing kind of really demeaning commercials just to try and finance his projects. And that's what he did for the rest of his life. And this is the last big one that everyone talks about. And it was always like, it exists, but it will never come out. And now it's finally out. So, what is it? That is a good question.
Good luck with
this,
Matt.
2 minutes.
Good luck with it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's funny because it's actually not a very complicated story or idea. It's just told in a very, very complex way. It is the story of a director, an aging kind of old dinosaur director from old Hollywood who has basically seen this new wave around him, this kind of the new Hollywood, the new wave, and he's gone, no, I still want to be relevant. I'm going to do so. I'm going to do that. I can do that. And we catch him just at the tail end of making this film. It's all gone tits up. They've lost the money. They've lost the leading guy who's run off in disgust at what they're doing. And a friend of his, an actress who he may well have had a relationship with in the past, says, I'm going to organise a big party. I'm going to show the film to investors. We're going to see what's there, so watch the rushes, and they'll give you more money. And all these people can see how amazing you are. But it doesn't really plan out that way. And then among all the people in that party, there's a kind of protege of his. There's a film critic. There's one of the investors. There's all these there's some real people. Dennis Hopper turns out, Claudia Broad turns out, all these kind of amazing figures turn up. And really, it's an unusual film because it's shot completely unlike any of his other films. It's way ahead of his time, I think. It's basically like a found footage film. And that's kind of how it's set up, almost like the Blair Witch, but obviously 30 years before the Blair Witch. And the idea is you have the film director's died and he's left all these rushes and there's all this evidence of what happened on the last day of his life and someone's assembled it all. So, and the funny thing is, it's very autobiographical, or it isn't, depending on who you believe, but most of the people in it are based on something, and most of it is kind of something that might have happened to Orson Wells, or was at least inspired by his life.
Helen, what are your thoughts on The Other Side of the Wind?
So, confession, I've never seen Citizen Kane.
Oh.
That's all right, you got a treat coming.
Oh my God.
Do you know what Rosebud is before we...
I do, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so...
Do you know what it really is?
What is it really?
I don't know, we said we're allowed to say anything on this, only.
We're allowed to say anything about The Other Side of the Wind. We'll talk about what Rosebud really is after here, I guess.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? It's quite an ambitious project, I think, for Netflix to have taken on this. For someone who has limited Orson Wells experience, I find it quite challenging, personally. I get the idea around it, and I kind of like how, you know, it has the missing footage bit in it to give it that authenticity, but I don't think I really agreed with it probably as much as you probably did, Matt. So interesting to find out what everyone else thought.
Yeah, well, I think if you're not, I don't think having seen any other Orson Wells films or not would give you any insight as to what this would have been. Eran, what were your thoughts on this?
I sort of, I love Citizen Kane. It's one of my favourite movies of all time. And in very much like the way that he was in real life, Orson Wells, he almost articulates the fact that he wants you to hate the film. And I very much felt that. He almost is like, you can feel that he's intently trying to make this a difficult film to follow and intently trying to bamboozle you and confuse you. And in many ways, it's so meta. It's so old. It's new. It's so old-fashioned of the time and when they were making movies like Easy Rider. And, apparently he hated the new wave of European cinema. He hated Godard and he hated Bergman. And he really didn't like that sort of cinema. So in many ways, he was throwing shade on that as an art form and trying to be antagonistic. And I think it comes across in the movie. Like I sort of felt slightly frustrated with it. I felt that he obviously he was inundated with praise consistently throughout his life for the movies he'd made, like Citizen Kane. And you can see that with John Huston's character. Like, at first I was like, is this like toxic masculinity, or these people just praising this man like a godlike figure? But then I realised maybe it's part of Orson Welles' frustration, the way he was consistently praised as a godlike figure when he didn't really feel worthy of it. And you can see that reflected in the movie. Yeah. So I felt all of that. I did struggle with the film. I was there was moments I was thinking, God, I'm lucky I'm not watching this when I'm tired, because I'm seriously falling asleep. But I found it fascinating. At first I worried about it when I was watching it because it was so verite and handheld and kind of mixing aspect ratios and stock and footage and that beginning sequence where everyone's leaving the studio and heading to the party is actually the most disorientating part of the film. Did you find it? Everyone's kind of saying small snippets to camera, and it's You've got
the jazz soundtrack.
The jazz soundtrack, and I was like, if this is 2 hours of this movie, I don't know if I can. But then it really mellows out, doesn't it? Once we kind of get to the party. But I found it fascinating, and I was like, and then suddenly when he showed the movie within a movie, which is very meta, which is kind of like this homage to the Bergman style European cinema. I found the old Orson Wells in those framing, didn't you? I sort of was like, wow, there's Orson Wells, because that's what he does in Citizen Kane. And some of that stuff was beautifully shot. And apparently Tarantino and people watched it recently in LA and were blown away by the actual movie itself and blown away by some of that stuff. But yeah, I found it a fascinating. It was a fascinating sort of construction of his own life and who he was as a man.
Because it's funny how he said, he's the one that says it's not autobiographical, but everyone else is like, dude, this is you. Just like admit it.
Well, there's another Netflix film which everyone should watch. If they're going to watch this, they should, I don't know what order would be best. I think probably you'd need to watch this first and then watch the documentary about the making of this film called They'll Love Me When I'm Dead.
Well,
and it's...
That comes up, if you stay to the end of the credits, for me anyway, it automatically started playing that.
Yeah, it did do, yeah.
Which is a brilliant, Morgan Neville is obviously incredible documentary director anyway, but it's a really, really, I thought it was a fantastic, I mean, it's on a par of the other film. I love Orson Wells. I wouldn't say this is near the top of my favourite films of his, but I'm really glad I saw it and I'd love to watch it again. I think it's tricky. I think it's got so much in it. It's like this big stew of ideas, not all of which really come out. And I don't know whether that's because they would never have come out or whether that's because it's just ended up being this mishmash because it's
like the whole thing. When he's been dead for 25 years, something was there in his mind, and we have no idea if this is how it's going to transmogrify when it finally came down to editing it. You don't know if you might have just taken out 45 minutes of it and gone, in fact, that's rubbish.
Yeah.
So this is...
Well, I think that's part of the frustration, that it can never be a closed-off auteur work because we never know what he actually intended and what his cut would have been.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the frustration when you're watching it, that you're saying, well, this is, Wes Anderson was involved in the restoration of this film. I think Clint Eastwood, like lots of people have had their hands in this. So it's like their interpretation of what they believe this film to be. And I think part of that frustration comes on when you're watching it, because you're watching it and you're saying, well, this is a variation of what he was trying to get across. But is this does this actually mean what he intended it for it to mean?
But you know what?
So I think that sort of comes across when you're watching it, a kind of anxious feeling of I don't quite know what the message is here when I'm watching this. But it was fascinating though.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I kind of feel like the fact that it's so meta, like Eran was saying, that it's kind of it is the making of it. You're watching it as it's happening and so on, and it is clearly commenting. You have Orson Welles, his protege was Peter Bogdanovich, who ended up becoming a much more financially and often critically successful director, and he plays exactly that part in the film. And John Huston basically plays a kind of variation on various people, but particularly Orson Welles and all this kind of thing. So I think I think it's, you could talk about it and watch it forever and not necessarily settle on one thing. And
it's an amazing time capsule of that period of filmmaking in Hollywood, though, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Well, when I was watching, I was thinking, was he trying to make a Russ Meyer type film, just with all the shots and how all the music was playing in the background and very kind of lurid? I mean, the main actress in the film within the film was like naked for 90% of the time, which is a Russ Meyer story, and it didn't seem to have any kind of flow. But when, as you're saying, Eran, when actually the film started playing out, that's when I could kind of calm down and think, okay, so this is what it's supposed to be. Because at the start I was like, I have no idea what's going on here. I didn't, like I said, the different frame ratios, I thought it was literally, I thought literally people had just had their Super 8s and their 16 mils and they were just filming on set and they just like cobbled all this stuff together.
Well, I think there's probably an element of that.
I think, definitely an element of that. But there is parallels between Citizen Kane and this movie.
Definitely.
That it's a portrait of an enigmatic man
who's just died.
Do you know what I mean? There are similarities between that movie, his first film, and this is his final film.
100%.
But I find all that fascinating because, as you said in the documentary, all that stuff that he was actually going through, he couldn't finish the film. He was going out there trying to find funding, which is actually happening in the movie. So how much of this was scripted? How much was he just kind of putting in from his real life? We all know that Peter Bogdanovich was the hottest up-and-coming director in Hollywood at the time, who plays this young hot and up-and-coming director. You know what I mean? The woman who's putting on the party is meant to be Marlene.
Yeah, which was originally going to be played by her, yeah.
So it's fascinating that I do wonder how much of it was scripted.
Yeah.
What were there pages on set? Was it just complete improvisation? Would he just turn up and say, well, this is what I'm going through at this point in my life and I'm just going to pump it into the film and just put it on the screen? I'd be interested to know like how much of it was scripted and how much of it was just on the hoof.
Yeah. I mean, I love a lot of what's in there. It doesn't feel like it's almost deliberately unpolished. It's not trying to make something that's perfect. And I think there's interviews in the documentary where he's saying, look, it's it's an experiment. I normally control every frame perfectly. It's just, everything has to be exactly how I imagine it. I'm doing the opposite. I'm just handing out cameras. Everyone's going to shoot it. It's going to be what it is. And it's an experiment.
So do you think if this was the final, if Orson Wells is like, oh, here's the film.
Yeah.
What do you think you might have taken from it? Do you think you're giving it a bit like rose-tinted glasses because you're thinking that he's dead now. We can't really do it. So this is the best we've got.
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I think the thing for me, because I felt like I'd seen this film before.
Oh, really?
Well, just because I've grown up watching, the films of Wes Anderson, Tarantino, who have obviously stolen, homage so much of his style that I kind of felt that I get how meta it is, but I did feel as though I'd kind of seen this before, but obviously in a different way. And from this, I kept thinking about the Jordan Peele quote about how he would never cast a white person in a movie because he's seen that movie before.
Right.
And I was watching this going, I've kind of seen this movie. And it sort of said to me that we are watching this finished and kind of, sort of sealed off and as a finished piece is almost like the end of the auteur. Right. And that we're entering a really different period of filmmaking where, you've got the old Oscars going, we can't have a Netflix film, blah, blah, blah. And then you've got Netflix going, yeah, sure, we're going to give you this money to make this movie for us, do what you want. And for me, it's really interesting that they picked this one up to finish it. And what they're doing on the other side with their kind of sort of bigger blockbuster things is really interesting. And then they've got this at the other side. But yeah, I just kind of felt, I've seen this film before.
But I think they chose it because it's a piece of history though, isn't it? It's a piece of history that should it have been finished? What are your thoughts on that? Should it have been? Do you reckon it should have been
I think 100%.
Do you think Orson Wells would have wanted that? Do you think?
Well, it's hard to say because it's not the only one of his films that wasn't finished. And he was accused by various people of saying, well, actually you get into the middle of a project, you lose your interest in it, you're a bit of a dilettante. Actually, there's an element of self-destruction and it's partly deliberate, which I think is unfair from anyone else you talk to. I think he was desperate to try and get these films made. But I think from his perspective, it's hard to say, isn't it? But from a viewer's perspective, from a fan's perspective, I'm so glad I've finally seen it. Yeah. And I think I would get something out of it every time I watch it. I'd love to watch the documentary again now and then go back and watch the film.
I think I need to see the documentary again before seeing the film.
Because when the documentary is fascinating. Had I watched that as well, or maybe watched it before, then I would have got quite a bit from it. Yeah. Even though while I was watching it, I did, Wikipedia and read a lot more about it. So I kind of got everything about it and how, this person was perhaps this real person and it echoed his life, etc. So I got that. I mean, while I was watching it, I was thinking, are there any examples of films that have been finished off by directors that have passed away? So I kept thinking about like artificial intelligence and how something like that probably should have been left.
Did Kubrick finish Eyes Wide Shut before he died? Was that
just
finish it? Just before.
But apparently, am I right in saying that? I'm pretty sure. So the famous unfinished projects he had AI. He had that other film, the kind of the Holocaust drama that...
Is this Kubrick?
Kubrick, yeah. And then he was about to start shooting, or he was thinking about shooting next, and then Spielberg was suddenly released Schindler's List. He was like, I can't do that film anymore. And his famously the...
is that the one about the clown?
No, I don't think so.
Oh,
no, I think it's called the Aryan Papers. And then there's another one where he was obviously going to do Napoleon was his big thing. He was going to do Jack Nicholson. And then they couldn't do it at the last minute, and then someone else ended up making it. And apparently, Kerry Fukunaga was doing that. They're going to do with his original script. So someone will actually be not even, I guess, doing the Spielberg route of taking the script and then somehow doing it themselves.
Well, Kerry Fukunaga is a fantastic.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah,
it's amazing. Yeah, if anyone's going to do it,
it's one like that.
But I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because I just. It's a bit like when people say, oh, you've ruined the book by making a bad film, or why did you remake this French classic? And it's like, well, just go back to the original. You don't have to. You can put your fingers in your ears. If you don't want to watch The Other Side of the Wind, you don't have to. But I'm glad someone has.
Here's something I kept thinking about when I was watching it. And I was thinking about you being an editor. because obviously I know I was talking about you being an editor. I know you're an editor. Because obviously the speed of the cuts was quite quick.
Yeah.
And you couldn't have managed that back then on those old Steam
you're right.
on the old editing system.
Yeah.
The speed with which they were cutting.
But he did though, because he'd already cut 30% of it.
Had
right?
he? So with like the speed of how those cuts were, because they were like 1 second
That's
cuts.
the stuff I saw.
Because
Some
of the cuts were like, go to black and white, 4 by Academy ratio, go to them 4 widescreen in colour.
Yeah.
Go to, like, it would chop between 4 different cameras within like the space of a minute.
I mean, it's light years ahead of his time. And
So he was way ahead of his time, what he
and
was
not
trying
only
to
that,
achieve.
but apparently, so his partner is the naked woman in the film, the actress Oya Koda. She basically, apparently, back 20 years ago or 10 years ago, whenever she was trying to get this film off the ground again, must have been about 20 years ago, she showed it to a bunch of Hollywood directors, and apparently she showed it to Oliver Stone. He was like, I like that. and then used it on every film since. So from JFK onwards, that thing of you're in...
Yeah, especially Natural Born Killers. It's got all
right.
those mixture of stocks and aspect ratios and
I
stuff.
think she got quite pissed off. She was like, whoa, hang on.
Do you think it would have been a hit back then if he'd have released it, if he'd have got to release it? Because I was thinking now, if you look at the reviews, everyone's praising it as a masterpiece. And because he was going through his toughest period, he'd been in exile for 20 years.
Yeah.
Do you think it would have been a hit back then? I don't think it would have been.
No,
I think he would have been
probably not.
destroyed for that film. And he only now would have been reflecting on it and saying, it was a masterpiece all along and he was way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
And
It's not a bitter film, but it's pretty savage.
It is against the industry, yeah.
I don't think Hollywood tends to love films that say how shit Hollywood is.
Yeah, they love films that love Hollywood and acting.
Yeah, M. Night Shyamalan, when he put a critic getting savaged in Lady in the Water, like all the critics, they went through.
I'm not buying this. Yeah. I don't think I would be surprised if it was anyone's favourite film of all time.
Oh,
but
sure.
I think it's fantastic. I think I'd love to keep on watching it at different stages of my life. I think I'd get something out of it each time.
It's fascinating that I heard that Tarantino watched it recently or a couple of years ago with Rian Johnson. And then because it is very much about Hollywood and Los Angeles, and now his next film is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And, it's about filmmaking and being in that environment at that time and specifically in that period of who directed Chinatown? Roman Polanski,
sure.
and all that kind of era.
Yeah,
so it must have had a massive influence on him, I reckon.
And that stars John Huston as well. He plays quite a similar character in some ways.
Yeah.
It's
true, yeah.
There are issues with it. I think I would definitely say, watching it, and there is it's a willing participant in the film who actually co-wrote it, but a naked woman who walks all the way through it, and there's another female critic gets smacked in the face at the end and so on. I'd say there are certain issues.
Yeah,
with
there
it.
were serious things. She just gets punched.
I'm not denying any of that. I mean, like you said, it's
Couldn't
a
do
kind
that
of...
now without a massive uproar, could you?
You can do...
No,
probably not. Probably
it made
not.
me think about how kind of misogynistic that whole period of time was in filmmaking.
Well, that's what I said
and how
about-
everyone making the decision that the studios is male-driven and him and how he was...
That's what I was thinking about, the Russ Meyer kind of thing. You would not have that kind of film.
No.
That kind of director, just every single film would be naked women walking around for no particular reason.
I mean, he is spoofing, on the one hand, he's kind of spoofing Antonioni and so on, but he is also having his cake and eating it. He's just here's a naked woman for 50% of the film.
He's spoofing it, but clearly enjoying
it. Before we go to the scores, Eran, you've worked within the Netflix system. Can you kind of get an idea of why they thought we need to make this? Was it just like restoring art history in a way, or?
I think so, yeah. I don't think it would have happened without them.
No.
I think they tried to have a GoFundMe page for the project, and I think those sort of Clint Eastwood and Wes Anderson, the people that got behind it, trying to get funding to get it made.
Sure.
I think it's an important part of cinema history. I think cineasts will love it. It wasn't exactly my cup of tea, but and I'm somebody who loves film. I sort of struggled with it. I found it fascinating. It almost was a capsule in time. It was fascinating to watch. It kind of, in many ways, when you watch a program like Mad Men, and you kind of get an impression of what it must have been like to work. You must have get an impression of what it must have been like to be in the 70s when everyone was doing acid and smoking weed at parties and just getting out their faces and orgies or whatever was going on. You kind of get the feeling of what that energy must have been. But and I think it's important that Netflix did it. I think it's fair play to them, because I think it would have just sat on a shelf forever and ever beyond that, and never would have got to see it. And at least people can sit and reflect on it and talk about it and be here now.
I think it shows the breadth of what Netflix does, which is kind of, I think, that if you go onto the main page, obviously it's changing every 5 minutes, but I think you would see, obviously it will push bigger films, or from that scene, it seems to be the way, even though I don't always watch those kind of films, or not exclusively. Those are the kind of films that come up. But if you're a bit more inventive about the way you look around it, the kind of stuff, when you asked us on, and I thought, okay, what films can we find? There's some incredible films there if you just look a little bit harder.
Because I've had people say, "Oh, there's nothing on Netflix." I'm like,
There really is. There is. Yeah.
Just scratch a little bit further.
For sure.
And they always complain, "Oh, the American Netflix is so much better." But like there's thousands of films on UK Netflix. I'm sure you can find something you can watch every day of the week if you just like thought like slightly differently.
But it's, with the best will in the world, I like Eran says, I can't imagine anyone else on the planet having funded this film. And I'm so glad they did.
And that's why I think Netflix is an important part. And I was personally gutted that Roma didn't win the Oscars. Right. And it seems that the backlash is people were against Netflix for like, how dare you?
How dare Netflix put money behind a film that maybe a major
awesome.
studio
that's
might
so
not have done?
Yeah, like the Scorsese's new film, for example. Is it called The Irishman? It's called The Irishman. Yeah. Apparently that struggled to get financing for a long time. And no one was going to make that kind of gangster epic at that budget anymore. And Netflix came on, and so we would never be watching that. So, whatever you may think of the film when it comes out, we would never be getting the opportunity to watch it or see it or have all those actors coming back together again, because studios just aren't making those movies out there at the cinema at the moment, and people like Netflix are. So I think we need to appreciate that.
Okay, let's head to the scores for The Other Side of the Wind.
So welcome to the spreadsheet of dreams. Now, all the scores are out of 5.
It's an actual spreadsheet. You're not just making this up. It's real.
This is pretty amazing.
Yep.
Wow. An excellent spreadsheet.
You make like feature-length films. A simple spreadsheet is not that amazing.
I've never made a spreadsheet. This is beautiful.
I'll teach you one day.
My mind is blown. I'm lost. I don't know what's going on right now. I'm staring at an Excel spreadsheet. Figures, numbers. This is as confusing as The Other Side of the Wind.
All out of 5. You may have decimal places, and we will start with you, Matt, with the recommendability score, please.
Well, this is I've had to have a big head scratcher out on this, because it's like at the end of the day, I will recommend. I've stopped trying to recommend things to people and thinking like, oh, well, I know the kind of person you are, therefore I will recommend this to you. Because partly it's pointless, and also it's like, no, I want people to push themselves a bit. So I'm going to say 5 out of 5, even though I know most people will hate it. Because I'm perverse and I'm a bastard.
It's funny because I think I have the same opinion as you. I think that it's important to watch.
Yeah.
I think it's important to watch if you are somebody who's into cinema and you're into the history of cinema, and it's a historical moment in film history that it's been brought out and put together by Netflix and restored. So I would say a 5 out of 5 that you should sit down and put your. If it was my wife sitting next to me, I know that she would say, "Well, this is bullshit." When I tried to take her to see Tree of Life, she said, "I am never going to cinema with you ever again." I was like, "What are you talking about? This is a masterpiece, Terrence Malick." But I think she would definitely be giving it a 1 to 2. But I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. Like, come on, that's it. Come on, Orson Wells.
I'm not going to give it a 5, I'm afraid. I do think it is a really, really interesting piece. But the fact that all of the footage is in there and it comes in over 2 hours is quite a slog. And I mean, I kind of got what was happening, and I kind of got, this is really clever that he was making this kind of film before it was a thing to make this kind of film. I got that repeatedly for 2 hours.
You can definitely get up and make a cup of tea while you're watching this film and come back and you're still still in safety. Fed the cat, do a little bit of work.
Can't believe you're saying that.
Whittle something out of wood and it's still
Orson's spinning in his grave.
I know. And I do think there is a very big audience for it, as you've clearly illustrated, and I think anyone who is interested in filmmaking will probably get a lot more out of it. And I do think it's a really historical piece, but I think somewhere between the two, this and the documentary, I would have found a bit more satisfying and got a bit more out of it. So I'm going to give it a 3.
But isn't that what's fascinating about? I think that's when we and you were growing up and were at university, that's what movies used to be. Like if you had to go and get DVDs, we wouldn't just seek out Die Hard or Lethal Weapon. Oh, you would go and get but I would, yeah. I know that I would, but we're coming on to that film now. I know that, but you would go and seek out really difficult kind of art house cinema, and it wouldn't always be an easy watch, and you would have to sort of kind of push yourself through it. But it was important to form those opinions about this as an art form. Do you know what I mean? And understand what you didn't like and what you did like. So I think it's important that places like Netflix have the The Bright with Will Smith, or you have The Other Side of the Wind. You know what I mean? You have the sort of distinction between the two, because
I think that's an interesting point you make about going to the video shop, because I was never one. Obviously, I went and got my Independence Day when it first came out on the first day it came out in the UK. But I was always there, like speaking to the guys, like, dude, so what should I watch? And there's like, what about Y Tu Mama Tambien? I was like, Spanish. And then I got it, and was like, yeah, fucking hell, give me some more of that stuff.
Well, my history was, my dad used to get Empire magazine, and I would kind of look through all the sort of 4 and 5 star reviews, regardless of what they were, and try and look out for them on, Film 4 and things like that. And, I watched some right weird shit. I was like, well, Empire gave it 5 stars, so I need to watch this and, sit through all kinds of weird stuff. And then the same at uni as well, and watch that. So, I have sat through a lot of films, but I just kind of got this, and it just...
No, I'm saying it's I'm saying it's a testament, because Helen and I are on the same film quiz team.
Yeah.
And I think everyone around that table has come from, they've had a background of like, they like the Marvel stuff. Yeah, but they also like a very kind of niche kind of aspect of filmmaking that a lot of people, if you just stopped a random person in the street, they'd be like, I'm going to see Transformers when that comes out.
But I think it's not, I have the same attitude to, I've got quite eclectic taste, like a lot of my friends in everything. So like in music, I think when I was growing up, people tended to be quite tribal.
Yeah.
And it seems to be less so. The only thing is, now that everything's instantly accessible, I've got 5 billion access to 5 billion tracks on my iPod, and I still listen to the same 3 albums. And I think there's a danger with that happening with film, where we really, I guess what we were saying before was that you're seeking out films, and I'd know that, okay, well, I've got to see that, I've read about this film, and then 2 years later it would appear on TV, and I'd watch it and I'd finally see it. Whereas now I can watch anything I want to, pretty much within reason.
Instantly, yeah.
And I don't. That's partly to do having young kids.
BBC Two, when I was a kid, like, we had to tune in your channel. And you'd get Jonathan Ross presenting some sort of obscure martial arts film from the 1970s, like with vampire zombies. And I'd be like, and I formed part of my aesthetic off of that stuff, of who I wanted to become as a filmmaker from those kind of
but you wouldn't
obscure Hong Kong action film.
Yeah, or moving pictures, or you'd have Mark Cousins.
Movie-drome.
But moving pictures as well was the other one that had, Howard Shaw. Anyway, whoever was fronting it had this, what was lovely is a bit like you were saying about the documentary, that you were kind of briefed. So they would have the film, they'd introduce it, they'd tell you things to look out for, and then you'd watch it, or you could do it the other way around. But I love that, because it was the only education.
Well, that's what
we had.
So Mark Cousins brought me up in film a lot as well, and he'd introduced like Lane to me, and then Days Confused in the same like double bill. I was like, I love this kind of curation, but this is going to actually lead into my score. I'm going to go lower than you, Helen. I'm going to go for like a 2 here, actually.
Oh, Kobe! I thought we were mates.
Cobes.
Drop the mic.
Everyone calls me
Cobolino. Cobolino.
No one's ever called me Cobolino. But it's because I would have to like sit someone down and like school them as to why I think this would be an interesting film.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Even if it was someone who I think was kind of cine-literate, be like, okay, so this is what happened. 25 years in the making. When he died, and all that, I would have to like really like sell it to them.
Yeah.
And then I'd probably say, actually, watch the documentary a bit.
Yeah.
And then come back to this film, because then it'd type and make more sense.
Yeah.
So because I'd have to do all that preamble before like saying press play, that's why I find it hard to.
Depends on whether you want your mates still to be your mates after they've seen it. If you don't care like me, then you just recommend it anyway.
Yeah,
they might not ask you again.
I like keeping my mates, So I'm gonna.
I've got kids and family now. I don't need mates
care,
anymore.
Yeah.
Just me and Eran.
Who's a kid and family?
Yeah, exactly, all in one.
Repeat viewing score, Matt.
I might be mad, but I would watch this many, many times to come. In fact, I've just fancy it, because I watched it last night and I was obviously cramming, like I was cramming before an exam. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I've left it this late. So I watched it.
Sure.
That wasn't the ideal circumstance. I'd love to go back and rewatch it, because I think there's so many scenes, like you said, it's cut so fast. The scene, it's almost like it's just this experience that it's like a wave that overwhelms you. You can't possibly absorb everything that it's doing at the same time.
I reckon if you had a party in Shoreditch, really cool hipster party, it's the sort of thing you'd project.
Oh, you project it?
Yeah, it's one of those films that'd be really cool just to project. So we'll go, oh yeah, that's Orson Wells' movie. Yeah, I just had it on the wall.
What are you saying about me?
I'm just saying, I know you're a bit of a hipster wanker.
It's fair enough. But I would watch that many, many times. But again, I'd watch the documentary as well. I might need breaks in between. I wouldn't necessarily watch them back to back or watch it, every night for a week.
So how does that translate to a score out of 5?
5. It's got to be 5, surely.
Mate, you're just hitting the hard 5s on this.
Unless I can go higher.
No.
I'll probably go for a 3 on this, because I don't know if I would sit through it again because I think it's important to sit through it and watch it and form an opinion about it. I do think it's a sort of thing that if my mates come over, I just stick it on the high def telly and have it playing at a party. Go, oh yeah, that old number. It's just Orson Wells' restored last movie. But I'll give it a 3.
Ellen.
I'm going to give it a 1. I'm not going to give it a 0 because I did have a moment when the documentary started playing. I was like, oh, we weren't meant to have watched this instead.
I did that as well. I was like, I checked the email.
Like, definitely watching this and not the documentary. Because if not, I've just wasted 2 hours. Anyway, so I am interested to watch the documentary now and kind of feel a little bit more
I think you'll find
it.
the documentary fascinating if you watch it. I think I would have liked to have watched it first and then watched the documentary. So I think I'm jealous that you're going to get a chance to do that.
I'm going to go 2 here. I think I really want to watch the documentary. And one thing I really love about sometimes when we come to the studio, like it's happened today, is when someone brings the film and explains it and gives more context and substance to it. Sometimes just come into a
Sometimes
recording.
helps, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So what happened?
Sadly, didn't happen tonight.
That's what happened.
So that's what it was about.
Okay. It is a better film than I thought. So I'd like to watch the documentary. That's definitely going to happen. And then watch this again maybe like a few months, a year down the line and like kind of go, okay, so I can see how this was put together. And also with like Citizen Kane, when I was showing it at school, I was like, oh, this is black and white, isn't it? But then when someone explains to you like what all the things he did that's amazing with his Steadicam footage and the camera angles, which just didn't happen before, then you kind of think, oh, okay, that's why this is like legit awesome. So I think sometimes you need that context to make you appreciate a film.
For sure.
That said, I don't think I'm going to watch it that much.
Yeah.
So that I'm going to.
It's over 2 hours.
Yeah.
We are very time poor. We're living in a time poor age. Yeah. You're right. Maybe you watch on fast forward. Is that an option on Netflix?
You can't watch it faster now. Oh, okay. I've tried. Speed. Small screen score.
What was it? Well, I wouldn't. It's funny because I wouldn't. In the past, I would always try and watch anything on as big a screen as possible. There are some films. I did see someone watching, I think it was The Godfather last year on their phone. I was like, I really hope that's not the first time you're watching that.
Pick the phone up and throw it.
Yeah. On the other hand, there's something about watching things on a phone, like if you know them a bit better. So I don't know. I certainly wouldn't watch. There's so much going on in every single frame. I wouldn't watch it for the first time on a phone, but I think I might revisit it because it might even be the kind of film that you want to watch in half-hour chunks or something, because you're right, it's exhausting to watch.
I think Orson Wells would have been like a Soderbergh. I think he would have been making stuff for phones now if he was still alive. Just kind of trying out all different formats and experimented with the form. I think he would have been into watching it on the phone.
But he's kind of ahead of his time and also thinking that every single if people haven't seen the film, every single person in the film, apart from the main guy, is filming everyone else, and that's kind of what we're doing now.
He just had everyone filming it on phones now.
I think you're right.
I think he kind of
he liked experimenting. Yeah.
How's that work to a small screen?
Well, so what's the vibe with the small screens? Is it like the first time you watch it, or just ever?
Just ever. Well, if you think like Roma, for example, for us was like
that's tricky.
I would love to have seen it on a bigger screen.
Yeah, so that was a low, small screen.
Right.
To be the big screen.
Oh no, I don't think that's such an issue with this. I'd say 3, maybe.
Eran.
Yeah, I'd go back for 3. I'll stick it at that. I won't waffle too much.
Helen.
I'm going to give it a 4. I think obviously when he was making this film, he wanted this to be seen on the cinema, at the cinema, on the big screen. But I think it works in the fact that it's not on that big a screen. Just because, we're so used to documentary style footage now that watching it on your screen is fine. And also, this is the place where you can go and see it because it's not on at the cinema anymore. And that if you want to go and see it, unless you're very lucky and have a very, very big TV, then you're only going to really be watching it on kind of laptop or TV size.
I'm going to go for a 2.5 here. And this is going to tie in with the engagement score. I just think if I was in the cinema, I think I would have absorbed it more. Yeah. Not that I think the visuals would have been that much better or enticing, but I think I would have just been like, let it envelop me a bit more. But I think that ties in with the engagement.
You're right. I think because when I was working in LA last year, there was Tarantino's got a cinema, the Beverly Cinema on Beverly Boulevard, isn't it? It's on Beverly Boulevard, isn't it? So when you used to go and watch his 35mm prints, even if you didn't like the film that much, there was something about being in an audience. Tarantino would often be there at the back of the cinema watching it. And I can imagine that if I've got a feeling he might show this film at his cinema. And I can imagine being in a cinema room with loads of cinema fans and just, I think people be whooping and cheering it on and getting drunk, and it'd be a completely different experience, this sort of movie. And quite in a dark room and just completely enveloped in that kaleidoscopic feel of the film. I think it'd be quite involving.
No, it's going to be amazing to see on a bigger screen for sure.
It's one of those things, isn't it, that because films are so on demand, that there may be in the future a generation that have never had that experience, and their only film watching will be, sitting with a laptop, flicking through films, stopping ones they don't want, and never have had that kind of shared experience, or the experience of sort of sitting there for the first half an hour and it'd be slightly out of focus until someone's waved at the guy to kind of shift it and things like that. So it's, are we going to see a complete shift where there will be no cinemas?
I really hope not. I mean, I can imagine they might do things, you could have, they had these goggles in Japan where you stick on like a VR headset effectively, but this is pre-VR. And it was an optical illusion. So whatever you were watching, it just felt like it was further away on a big screen, but apparently it got screwed with people's minds. Sure. And actually, it probably sent a couple of people to hospital, so they gave up on that. But you could still have communal, the same way that people play computer games at the same time. I imagine you could do that. You all tune in at the same time and you just sit there, so at least you could hear each other laughing. I went to see, for the first, my wife's away, so I went to go to the cinema the other day for the first time on my own in decades, and I was like, I really like doing this.
What did you watch?
We went to see Us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is a good one to watch on your own, without someone sitting next to you or hide. I was just in the zone. And also she likes to sit on the back row and I like to sit in the front row. And so we always sit in the middle, and neither of us are happy. So
you like to sit on the front row?
Compromise.
That's too close, man.
No, you're in the film.
I watched The Wrestler Bike with Mickey Rourke on the front row, and I felt sick. I was so handheld. I'll go middle. I don't
want to see anyone else's heads. I just want to be in it.
Let's go to the engagement score. How engaged were you whilst watching it? How we?
But I don't think you have any. For me, anyway, I don't know. I mean, I'd been waiting 25 years to watch it, so I was pretty fucking engaged. And also, it's a kind of battering ram of a film, and you might not like that. Yeah. People might find that too much, but you have no choice but to be engaged. You can switch it off. That's the only way not to be engaged by it, because something is always happening. And it's funny, starting out directing, I love, we were saying, you get into, we've all got quite eclectic tastes in film now, but the films that kind of inspired me, the way that I wanted to move the camera, the way it was kind of filmmakers like Orson Wells or like Martin Scorsese, kind of people who come up to you and they want to tell you a story and they grab you and they're like a kind of drunk in a bar. He's like, I'm going to tell you the story. I love Jim Jarmusch, I love Ozu, and I love all these other people who just like, here's the frame. I'm not going to tell you what to look at. But that's not the kind of film, those aren't the kind of films that I wanted to make. And I felt very much like this is that kind of film. It's the kind of film. And I remember, weirdly, I can't have seen that documentary about it that had those couple of clips from The Other Side of the Wind in 20 years probably. But I had it on a VHS and I must have watched it endlessly. And I just remember seeing those clips and thinking, God, that is actually how I've ended up cutting a lot of things subconsciously. So so I'm massively engaged. So I'd have to give it 5.
Because it's actually affected how you do your work.
It has. I've been nicking things off it for years without realising.
Eran?
I'll give it a 4 because I struggled with the beginning and then I kind of, halfway through I started to really get into it, and then by the end I was fully immersed. I was kind of really into it and kind of fully immersed. And I love that scene, by the way, where the girl gets into the car with the two guys.
That's
amazing.
Kind
of really surreal sort of Tarantino-esque sex sequence that goes on for about 7 minutes.
Yeah.
It's really odd, but I found it weirdly mesmerising. Not because of the nudity, obviously, the sequence, but I thought it was really beautifully shot. I was like, it would have been how Tarantino would shoot something like that now. Like
in that BBC, I'll send you a link to the BBC documentary. You can see it's a bunch of students. He just got a bunch of students. They're all like 18 years old, and he's like in his late 60s or early 70s or something. And he has got them all rocking the car, and you can see them shooting
hoses of water and running torches
amazing.
Past, isn't it? You saw that in the documentary, they're just running torches past and not really
so good.
driving down the road. Yeah, they kind of, you just had them rocking the car. But
stunning.
There was something about it that, it just... What stock do you reckon all that movie within the movie? It felt like it was like 75 mil or something.
It was like really plush, doesn't it? It's very,
it's real geek film.
This is great. That's why we've got directors on to talk about directors.
Because all that stuff looked really high definition. And when the movie within the movie, you could even see the makeup on her nose. And then like within the black and white stuff, it was really grainy and gritty, and you couldn't tell what was going on. But that stuff, I felt like it looked like it could have been shot yesterday.
Like that,
You know what I mean? It was quite amazing. But
it's funny because I guess even when he's pastiching something, he obviously is kind of slightly fallen in love with it despite himself. And then it's a sizable chunk of the film. If you're just doing a pastiche, like you said, you could have done that in 2 shots. If you just wanted to kind of, I'm trying to think of other films that have done that where you stick in a kind of film within a film. Even like Mr. Bean's done that.
In the documentary, they talk about that whole sequence in the car when she gets into the car with the two guys.
Right. Okay.
They talk about it quite in depth. And I did find that for me, that was the point in the film that I found myself drawn into it and being completely pulled into the movie. And then from
Imagine
that point
seeing that on a
onwards,
big screen. That would
have been quite amazing. So I think like when they said that Tarantino and people like Ryan Johnson were gobsmacked by it, I think it was those moments. Where I'm like, wow, some of this is really cool.
It's nuts. I mean, you don't see films like that now. You definitely didn't see them back then, but you don't even see films like that now. And I feel like, I started off by saying this, but I think in some ways when you see, you read interviews with Walter Merck and other people like that, who he was talking about how our understanding of editing, even the process of editing, it's such an unusual thing to do because obviously we don't edit in real life apart from when we blink. But the idea of, he was saying that the way that we, you can write music, so you can annotate music and someone else can understand it, but we don't even have any process to do that for film yet with editing or anything like that. And he said we're really at the kind of hieroglyphic stage and none of us know what's going to happen next, and maybe it's going to be a more immersive thing and we're going to have VR headsets and then you'll be guided on a thing, but maybe it'll be much more immersive. It's so hard to tell, but I feel like Orson Wells was one of those people who was light years ahead and people haven't followed that path, but they should. I hope it inspires other people to pick up cameras and try something similar or something different.
Helen, engagement score?
It's going to be a low one, I can feel it.
Fair enough.
2.5.
That's quite high. It's higher than I expected. I thought you were going to go for a 1.
There were moments that I think really kind of stood out, like the car scene, but there was just a lot of it that really could have been cut for me.
But I'm kind of with you. I'm not disagreeing with anything you said. I don't think it's perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I feel it's a shame. I would have loved. There's so many ideas and themes in there. I would have loved just to dwell on a couple. And I would thought it was so relentless and fidgety in the editing style and the shooting style. It could just calm down at moments. I wanted to hear from John Huston. It had even those moments were pretty hectic, and I felt like it could have explored some of them more.
Yeah, and also I watched it on Sunday afternoon and it was kind of light and sunny outside, and it's just all those things that kind of add to your experience, and this is about the engagement. So
I'm going to go for a touch. I'm just going for a 3 there. I think like yourself around at the start, I was like, I'm not sure I can. I've got other things to do right now. But then it was like, it kind of built in there. I did hammer washing up at the same time.
That's all part of the process, isn't it?
I'm sure Orson would be fine with that.
I think he'd be fine with that. It's like he knows I need my clothes for the Monday. That gives us an overall score of 3.3, which is actually
pretty decent,
higher than I thought it was going to be before heading in here.
Helped by some solid 5s along the way.
Some hard 5s and Matt.
I'm rigged
dropping
the system.
hard 5s. Boom, blah, blah.
Can I can't change those other ones back to fucking. I know.
It's too late now. It's
You can't up the score now, mate.
Indelible spreadsheets.
Orson, never forgive me.
Can you guys sign up by letting us know where we can find you online, or what films you're to watch of yours?
I am we're working on this boxing thing that I'm apparently not allowed to talk about because I've got I was sent lots of scary looking documents that meant that I'd never work.
I don't want you to be like beaten up. So,
but I'm on Twitter sometimes. Matt with 1T Whitecross, and I am the company that I've got with Fiona Nielsen. My producer is mint-pictures.com, so that's going to be online somewhere.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, I keep my social media usage to a minimum and have private accounts because I used to be on Twitter and then got myself in some serious trouble back in the day when I tweeted something about Matthew Vaughan, who was represented by my same agent. And I was like, and then I got a phone call from agent saying, you better get that down off Twitter now, man. Otherwise your career is over. I'm like, God damn, I better get this down.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I tweeted. So it was something that was in the press that day and I just made a comment on it. And it was about 2 directors that were represented by the same agency that me. And then I got a phone call. My phone was just blowing up saying, man, you need to get that tweet down. Otherwise, you're going to be sued. And I was like, oh God. Then from that on, I was like, you know what? This is too much of a dangerous platform. So I kind of keep my accounts private just for family and stuff. But I'm currently in the process of pre-production on the follow-up to Shifty.
Yeah.
My first film, which is it's called The Bright Side, and it's the same town but a different set of characters.
Nice.
The script is incredible.
Yeah,
it's
Matt,
amazing.
I sent Matt the script the other day. Various projects. I have been developing a big TV project in the States at the moment with Jackson Pictures. Just sold one of my action scripts to E1 called The Queen's Guard, which is like a big sort of action movie script. Yeah.
So we should link to you both you guys on IMDb, basically.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're hoping to do some stuff together as well.
Yeah, me and Matt are
ideas.
developing a big TV project together, aren't we, at the moment? We're kind of thinking about getting back together and working together.
Come and knock on Netflix's door at some point.
Yeah.
See if they'll talk to us. We were really, actually, you know what? Not cynically, but we were really nice about Netflix because I do think they're brilliant. So if you fancy making something with us, you know, the door's always open.
Yeah.
All right, guys, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Flixwatcher Podcast. Leave us your 5-star review on iTunes. Follow us on Twitter @FlixWatcherPod. And if you aren't already, get yourself subscribed.
Cheers, Brendan, for your fantastic editing skills. Really, really appreciate it. And cheers to everyone, all the mighty people, for the tunes that you can hear right now.